I'm Polly Hill, and I'm here with Andy Neale, entrepreneur and public speaker, on the subject of driver safety, well-being, driver training, and we have a very catchy heading which caught my eye, Andy, which is "You're stressed, good." Could you give me a little bit of elaboration on that?
Yeah, obviously the headline was written to catch attention, but the fact that you are stressed is good news because it means you're alive. And just to give you a couple of anecdotes, the first being, we've all heard of someone that's worked for 45 years, looked forward to their 65th birthday, retired, had a party and dropped dead the next day.
Yeah.
And even if we don't know that person, we've heard about that person. But probably more relevant is something that used to happen to me when I had a proper job and was working silly amount of hours and doing lots of other things when I was much, much younger than I am now. Is every time I had a holiday, I went away, and like one day after I got on holiday, I got ill.
Yeah.
And I got a cold or whatever it was. And subsequently, knowing what I know now, that's basically when we relax, the body goes, oh, great, time for a rest, because it hasn't had time for a rest. And the stress is actually producing chemicals that, keep us going and move on. So, yeah, the fact that you're stressed is good. It's how we manage that stress. Another analogy you could use is cholesterol. If I say the word cholesterol, everyone goes, oh, that's bad. Well, actually, there's two types. There's good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. So, yeah, everything in moderation. And we've all heard of stress management, but probably never thought about what that actually means, because we have stress. There's nothing we can do about stress. We're going to get it, particularly in today's busy lives. But it's how we manage it that's important, and how we can use that to our advantage.
Does this all go back to that sort of fight or flight instinct?
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about, we look forward to a holiday in the summer and we think that's a long way away, but in an evolutionary scales, we haven't developed from when we lived in caves. As a species, we are actually hardwired to make stupid decisions when we are stressed. And I'll come on to it in a bit more detail later on. But in essence, back in the days, stress was caused by coming out of your cave in the morning and being confronted with a snake. And you'd look at the snake and you'd get your snake identification chart out of your loincloth and then realise actually you'd left it in yesterday's loincloth, which is now in the wash. And so you would analyse it and then go, oh, is it a poisonous one or is it a friendly one? And actually, by the time you've done all that, you're dead.
I feel much the same every time I see my children in the
Yes, that's the modern day snake or offensive tribe. So what evolution did was actually when we saw something like a snake or a dinosaur or another tribe, a physical threat, the heart sends a message to the brain and we are instantly provided with two chemicals, cortisol and adrenaline, that allow us to run faster or hit harder, in essence, fight or flight. Yeah. The last thing that we need to do is think, we just need to react.
Yeah.
We've all been in that situation where we've been caught out by surprise. I was on the railway station this morning looking for the train and one came from behind me and it was a bit like, but as I went, I moved away. I didn't think, there's a train, should I move away? I just did it automatically. And the two chemicals, there would have been a spike in my heart and the chemicals would have been produced. Of course, modern day stress is not caused by any of those physical dangers. Modern day stress is caused by your children. Your mortgage payments going up, the electricity bills going up, the email from a colleague. Someone, going back to driving, someone cutting you up in a car, taking your space. So there's lots of things that cause stress today that cause the same physical response inside of us, physiologically, but have no need for us to fight or flight. They have no need for us to run faster or hit harder, although in certain circumstances that would be a nice option. But we don't do that in modern day world. So these chemicals are now being stored up inside us. Hence the phrase, stress the hidden killer, because these chemicals in too much quantity being stored up inside us and not being used have now been proven to have cause or certainly contribute to certain types of cancers, heart disease and type 2 diabetes. So it's about how we control that and understanding how we work physiologically. I left school at 15 years old. So I've never done a degree, I've not been to university, I didn't even stay on into the sixth form. I left and went out into the real world and got a job. And I understand this. Okay, I understood it probably later on in life, but it isn't hard. It's just, and it frustrates me a little that what we're going to talk about in a bit more detail actually isn't taught in schools, because this is pretty much a life skill that is far more important than, dare I say it, 90% of what is probably taught in schools these days.
Yeah, so you're saying that we can harness this sort of beast, which is stress, and use it to our advantage and manage that in a positive way.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, we call the technique the freeze frame technique, because it's like sitting there watching the TV and the adverts come on, and none of us like adverts, do we? So we press the pause button, and then we go off and do something else, or we press the mute button. So we do exactly the same with the stress. So when you recognize the stress in yourself, you need to firstly recognize it and hit the pause button, because then you can start to do the techniques that we're going to go into that will help you to unwind it and clear the brain down and get some clarity of thought. As I said earlier, we are hardwired, almost pre-programmed to make stupid decisions when we're stressed. To give you an example, we've all at some point in our lives, probably more regularly than we would like, been involved in a conversation or discussion, okay, let's be honest, let's call it an argument, with someone we love. And as the words fall out of your face, almost instantaneously you realize that what you've just said has made the situation worse. Why did we do that? Well, again, it comes back to being hardwired. It's just a natural, almost knee-jerk reaction to what was said to us, and we said something back. But how come we instantly realize that what we said made it worse? Why didn't we not say it? And that's because we can't think. We literally cannot think in a stress situation, because it doesn't want us to analyze what type of snake it was. So evolution hasn't been very kind, because we're now thousands of years away from when those dangers were a physical danger to being a mental danger. And stress 99.9% of the time these days is an emotional reaction and not a physical reaction. It requires us to have clarity of thought, and we can't do that. There's a piece in the brain called the hippocampus, which normally sits tightly around the brain. And when we're stressed, the heart sends a message to the brain via the autonomic nervous system. It hits a little piece called the amygdala, which then sends off signals for us to produce cortisol and adrenaline. And this all happens instantaneously. And at the same time, the hippocampus flattens out and restricts access to the top part of the head, which is called the thinking center. So when someone says to you, I can't think, just think about, we're in a pub quiz. And the question master asks a question, and someone on your table goes, oh, I know that, and all the eyes go on that person. And then they go, I can't think, because all the eyes have come on and they're under pressure. Now we're saying to, okay, well, what is the answer? And they can't think. They physically can't, or physiologically can't think. They can't access the smart brain because the hippocampus is flattened out and restricted that access. They could run really quickly out of the room or hit the question master really hard, but they can't actually access the answers. And the same if you think about kids, aged 11, sitting at school, doing an exam, and you've been stressing to them for 2 or 3 years how important it is that they do their work. And this is a really important, a really important part of their life and time in their life where they need to do well in this exam. So when exam day comes, I'm going to show my age here, and the teacher says, okay, turn the paper over, you can start, kids. They go, oh, and they look down at the paper and it's a complete blank. Because they can't access the answers. They have a high heart rate because you've been telling them, impressing on them how important today is. Message to the brain, cortisol, adrenaline, hippocampus flattens out. What we do is we teach them how to reverse that technique, and we can teach people very easily how to reverse that technique. But as I say, the first part is recognizing that there is a problem and pressing the pause button. So that's the hardest bit, if you like. It's that stop before the words come out.
So tell us a little bit about you and your background, Andy. So you've worked extensively, I think it was your own business, driver training.
Yes. I started life when I left school and I went into the police, did that for 10 years. I then left that when I was 27, started my own learner driving school. As I said, I left school at 15 with not too many qualifications. So being a learner instructor was, all I could do. I was a qualified driver. So I did that. And then I got into advanced driving, which turned into what was then in the late 80s, early 90s known as fleet driver training. So we trained corporate drivers of all vehicles, from cars to massive, great big trucks, on and off road, on race circuits, on roads, how to drive better.
Yeah.
But not physiologically. It dawned on me very quickly that we were actually teaching people how to do something that they already had a license for. So
right.
Everyone we sat in a car next to or a truck next to had a license that said they're fully qualified to drive this vehicle. So we're not actually teaching them to drive. So what were we teaching them to do? We were teaching them how to concentrate better, how to observe better, and how to anticipate better. And they are the three core skills of safer driving: concentration, observation, anticipation. If you can master those three, all the other bits will come naturally. So concentration, observation, and they're all physical skills. Let's start with concentration. So concentration is really easy when someone says to you, I really want you to concentrate hard on this subject, whatever it might be. But when you've been driving for 15, 20, 25, 30, 40 years and you're sitting on a motorway, what the hell do you need to concentrate for? Because it's a straight road, there's nothing happening, it's boring, you're in a nice environment, you've got your heated seats on. When I first started to drive, the heater took about 5 months to warm the car up. If it was cold in November, you knew it would be eventually warm again in April. Nowadays, you press a button, and with electric cars, you can even warm them up from your front room as you look out and go, I'm going out to the car in 5 minutes, or program it the night before to warm the car for you. So we're not in touch with the environment anymore. So manufacturers have made life so easy, we don't have to concentrate. The other problem with concentration is our brain is about 80% water. So if we are 2% dehydrated, which is not very much, it can and will affect, again, physiologically, our ability to concentrate by up to 20%. So again, just 2% dehydration equals 20% lack of ability to concentrate. So again, it comes back to I can't think. Now it's like, well, I can't concentrate because I'm dehydrated.
That's astonishing. And I think, parents will understand as well. One of the biggest problems in school, I've constantly gone on about the fact that my son needs to be hydrated. There is never any encouragement to drink any fluids.
Yeah. I mean, I'm dehydrated now because I've been talking for the last 10 minutes. So excuse me while I rehydrate.
I feel wholly unprepared now.
Yeah, well, this is, I got this on the train this morning. It's 330 ml, so a third of a litre. The wisdom will tell you I need to have 2 or 3 litres a day.
Yeah.
So 6 of these bottles.
Yeah.
And okay, tea's got water in it, coffee's got water in it, beer's got water in it, But hydration is water.
Yeah.
And we need to stay hydrated physically to be able to concentrate in the first part. That's before the stress comes in.
I'm going to quote that.
Yeah,
that's
so it's
really
just
interesting.
It's, I used to say to people, what does Usain Bolt, the fastest man on earth, what does he do on the way to the start line, which is on the way to work, incidentally. He doesn't stop at the drive-through and get a Big Mac and a coffee. He will make sure that he is physically and emotionally in the best place he can possibly be, so that when the gun goes off for 9.5 seconds or however long it is, he's put himself physiologically in the best place to be able to perform. And us going to work or us going to do anything that we want to do means that we need to put ourselves in the best physiological position to be able to do it. Take fatigue, for example. The 2 times in the day we are most likely want to go to sleep are between 2 and 4 o'clock in the morning, obviously, but also between 2 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. What do all the Europeans, Southern Europeans do? The Mediterraneans, what do they all do between 2 and 4 in the afternoon? Oh, they listen to their bodies and they have a siesta. And we all call them lazy. What do? Oh, we fight through it. We probably haven't had a lunch break or we've eaten at our desk, and then we fight through the one period in the day where actually rest and recuperation would make us so much more effective after that break. But no, we're British, we fight through that. We don't listen to our bodies. And then we wonder why. I used to do a work for a major car manufacturer, And someone said, I had a meeting with one of the big bosses one day, and someone said to me, "Oh, you're all right, you've got a meeting with him in the morning." I went, "Oh, right, why is that?" They said, "Oh, you don't want to meet him with him in the afternoon. He's horrendous, he's horrible. It's like, goes out to the pub at lunchtime, and has a couple of pints of Guinness, and then in the afternoon, it's like, oh, it's dreadful." I said, "Oh, well, thankfully, I've got the meeting in the morning." But yeah, he was, it's physiology. We can't change it.
Yeah.
Sports managers, when I was a kid growing up, all football matches started at 3:00 on a Saturday afternoon. And then advertising and TV got involved. And now they start at 12:30, 3:00, 5:30, 6:00. European football was on last night. They were starting at 8:00. And how do these players get ready to be able to physically perform? Because some of them are going to be early birds, some of them are going to be night owls. How do they physically get to the point where they are able to perform at whatever the time is? It's the famous story of Stan Bowles, who used to play for Queen's Park Rangers. They used to go and hook him out of the bookies at 2:50 in the afternoon next door to Loftus Road, because he was due on the pitch at 3:00. Nowadays they're all honed, and they all get sent to bed. If they're playing an 8:00 game, they get sent to bed at whatever time it is, hydrated, proper nutrition and everything else, so that they're 9:00 in the morning, or if you like, their peak time for performance is the time
they're
kick
going to
off.
play.
So there's a huge amount of work goes into them as individuals, and about how they are different from each other and what their own individual needs are with regards to hydration, nutrition, and fatigue, so that they can perform.
So you've spoken about concentration. You said also two other factors: observation,
and anticipation. Yeah, observation is a skill, and it's a skill we're not taught when we're taught to drive. If you can remember back to your driving test, you were taught how to physically control the car, how to steer, how to brake. You were taught verbatim from the highway code that this sign means whatever this sign means. And then you had to show some random stranger for 25 minutes that you could do all that in the right order and not hurt anybody or not put anyone at risk. Observation is a completely different skill. Observation, when we teach people to observe, we teach them to look out as far as they. So the first question I would ask someone is say, "Well, what's the furthest thing you can see?" And they would say, the red bus, quarter mile down the road. And I go, "Well, go further." "Well, that's the furthest I can see." "Well, what about the sky? What about the sun?" That's a long way out. So go further. Our natural focal point, again, comes back to physiology. Our natural focal point of the human being is called cricket pitch vision. It's 22 yards long and this wide. And if you just let everything relax and open your eyes, you will be looking within that area, because we haven't evolved to look further ahead, because we don't need to, because we can only move at a certain speed without the aid of an aeroplane or a bus or a train or a car or something else. So evolution, again, as we showed earlier, isn't that quick. So we're in a position where unless someone teaches us to scan, look further, then we won't do it. So what we teach people to do is look as far as they can and then work their way back to the bonnet of the car. So we go, sky, buildings, bus, pedestrians, cyclist, blue car, red car, white van, and then we go behind in the mirror, and then we go out again and come back. So we go out and back, out and back, out, back, behind. So far, middle, near, behind, far, middle, near, behind. And by doing that, hazards or potential hazards appear and disappear. And it doesn't matter who you are, if you see something that is a potential hazard, then you will take your right foot off the accelerator and you will do something about that. You might even, if it's a hazard on the right, you might even move to the left slightly. You might, if it's a hazard behind, you might even consider putting your brake on the brake lights to warn the person behind that you're going to be slowing down shortly. So observations is a key skill that needs to be taught, and that's something as part of a driver training session, in vehicle session, we would spend a lot of time. We would get people to do a running commentary, and people say, I can't speak that quick. Slow down then, because if you can't name the obstacles that are coming up, then slow down, give yourself more time, and then with practice you can then start to speed up again. People quite often say, I can't talk that quick. Slow down, give yourself more time, and then you can deal with things. So that's observations. And then the third thing is anticipation. And this should come fairly naturally, as I said. If you see a danger, you normally react to it. Sometimes we assume that someone isn't going to pull out of a junction. So we might need to teach people that expect the worst, but don't encourage the worst. If someone's waiting to pull out of a junction in front of you, what you want to see is the whites of their eyes. So at least if you're looking at the back of their head, then they can't see you because their eyes are in the front of their head. So what you want to do is see their head looking towards you. Once you see their head, once you've got that, what we call eye contact, then if you just move slightly away from them, it gives them a message that you're coming round, that you're not letting them out. We've all been in that situation in slow-moving traffic in the morning rush hour, and there's someone waiting to pull out, get into that little gap in front of you, and you don't want them to pull out, so the last thing you do is look at them, because you know that as soon as you get eye contact with them, you have to let them out. So you just ignore them and you look straight ahead, and you go, I'm not letting you out. So eye contact is good, but followed up by a movement away from them. It's like walking towards two people walking down a high street together. No one says, you go left, I go right. We just automatically do that. Occasionally we get into that little embarrassing dance, don't we, with a complete stranger where we both go the same way at the same time, and we smile and laugh and joke about it. But no, it's just a drop of the shoulder or a movement of the vehicle. So body language is important in a car. It's not just a steel box that we can hide in. So yeah, concentration, observation, anticipation, the three core emotional skills.
And as regards going back to concentration, about this sort of stress instinct, essentially, and how we react, what can we do? Obviously, you've mentioned hydration. Is there anything else that we can do to temper?
Yeah, I spoke earlier about the freeze frame technique. So let's go into that in a bit more detail. So, as I said, when we get that moment, we have a high heart rate. There's a spike in our heart rate. And when that happens, as I said earlier, it sends a message via the autonomic nervous system to the brain. So we've all heard of the saying, your heart rules your head. Now, we don't think of that as a stress saying. We think of it in other terms. My mother told me on numerous occasions, your heart's ruling your head, and I ignored her, and she was right eventually. But don't ever tell her I said that. So your heart rules your head, but physiologically it does, because the messages that come from your heart send a message to the brain, and the brain then reacts and produces the cortisol and adrenaline, and the hippocampus flattens out. And I said we could teach people to unwind that process. And it's very simple to unwind. So we press the pause button. We now simply take a deep breath, and we breathe in for the count of 5. And then we breathe out for the count of 5. And we breathe in for 5, and we breathe out for 5. That's changed the heart rhythm. By doing that, the heart now sends a message back to the brain and basically says, we can stand down. We don't need cortisol and we don't need adrenaline. We're going to start to produce something called DHEA, which is also known as the love hormone. But importantly, the hippocampus winds back down over the brain and restores access to the thinking center so that we can then make a sensible decision, like to go out and buy some flowers to apologize for what we just said. Or if you're a child in a classroom, we teach them when they open turn the paper over, and it's like, sit there for the first 30 seconds and just breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Shut your eyes. That would help as well, because it cuts out the other distractions around you. Don't do that if you're driving. But yeah, you can shut your eyes, and then you can breathe in and out for 5, in for 5, out for 5, reset the system. And this wasn't actually scientifically discovered until the mid-1990s by a guy from California, who then started a company called HeartMath. And you can Google HeartMath and look up, and they've got lots of tools that you can use. I've got stuff on my computer where I can plug in people, put an earpiece on them, and we can see their heart rhythm on the computer. And then I just give them a little bit of stress by asking them to sing in public or tell a joke or invade their space and get too close to them. And you instantly see a spike. You don't see any change in their face, but you do see a spike on the screen as their heart is sending that message, the help signal up to the brain to produce these chemicals. Now, if you think about that during your normal working day, about how many times you're getting stressed, how much cortisol and how much adrenaline you're producing, and not using because we're sitting down, then life is becoming more stressful. And and you're living in that permanent state of stress. But simply by unwinding and doing the breathing exercises, and if you're in a position where you can do it, if you can create now today a happy place, just somewhere, and it could be, I always had one where I was on a golf course in Florida, overlooking the 14th green on a balcony, with a lake in front of me, with alligators swimming in it and everything else, and that was my happy place. And I could instantly just close my eyes and be there, and I would imagine that scene, and breathe in for 5 and out for 5. 5 years ago, I moved to Cornwall, and I now have another vista where I look out over the ocean. So I've got 2 happy places, and I can choose which one I want to go to. Yours might be a wedding. It might be, the birth of a child. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be sitting on the beach with a gin and tonic. But think of a powerful, and it needs to be a powerful emotion, because we're trying to overcome the negative emotion, the person cutting you up, the person that sent you the email or the phone call or whatever it might be. We're trying to cover up a positive emotion, a negative emotion with the positive one. So just think of one and always use that, and use that with the breathing exercises at the same time. And that will completely change your physiologically inside and give you a clear passage of thought. And that's the freeze frame technique in essence. And the beauty of the breathing is you can use it anytime. You can do it for 2 or 3 minutes. You can do it for 30 seconds. People say, I don't have time to do this. Well, I play Words with Friends on my phone. Just a common game. And every time I finish a little game, I have to sit and watch an advert for 5 seconds, because I'm too tight to pay £3 a month to have it advert free. So I get a little advert come up. So what I do is when the advert comes up, I breathe in and I breathe out. By the time I breathe in and out once, the advert's gone and I'm on to the next game. I said earlier about pausing or muting the TV when the adverts come on. Again, great 2-3 minutes, just sit there and do your breathing exercises. When you're in a particularly boring meeting and there's someone on the far side of the table that's starting to talk a whole load of rubbish that really doesn't involve you, but you've got to be in the meeting anyway, just go to your happy place and do your breathing
Sounds
exercises.
like you've been there a lot, Andy.
Yeah. I'm only 35. I've got and when you're driving, of course, you can do the breathing exercises all day long. You want to be concentrating on the road ahead and not necessarily the beach or whatever it might be, but certainly the breathing exercises in for 5, out for 5 will help you to control those emotions.
Is that why some people kind of thrive on this stuff? Like how do you mentioned Usain Bolt earlier? Do they master stress but by breathing exercises and somehow kind of harness its power into positive?
Yes. We work with drivers predominantly, or I did, when I had my driver training business. I worked with drivers of all types of vehicles. But in 2008, I set up a performance management company called Performance on Demand. And I did exactly what it said on the tin. Mm-hmm. And what I found was I met a guy who was delivering like stress management, high performance techniques to chief executives to big multinationals. Shell would fly him out to Houston in Texas and pay stupid amounts of money for him to go and talk to the senior team there. And I always had this ambition that actually I wanted to replicate that and provide something to the man on the street, mm-hmm. To me and to you. Because, there's only one chief executive of BP, but there's like thousands and thousands of employees who are also stressed that could also do with benefits from this stuff. So we developed a program that we could deliver out to everybody, inexpensively. The breathing exercises and workshops and stuff like that. But then we also, as I said, alluded to, we work with children in schools. And again, that frustrates me that just hasn't been rolled out across the curriculum, across all education, because it's really not difficult to teach kids to breathe. And when you can show them on the screen their own heart rate and how the breathing can affect that, it's a really powerful tool. But then we also work with a lot of sports people. And there are some sports that lend themselves better to the stress situation. Golf is a perfect environment, because when you're playing golf, there's a still period before you play your next shot. And if your next shot is a 4-foot putt to win the British Open for the first time, suddenly the ball looks looks 3 times bigger than the hole, and you wonder how you're ever going to get it in, and all the negative thoughts come on board about, like, I can't do this because it's really important now. The fact that the day before you did it 100 times out of 100 with your eyes shut, standing on one leg with someone else's, walking stick, is completely irrelevant. The emotions take over. So to stop and to evoke the positive emotion and to breathe in for 5 and out for 5, and then be able to think logically about how I did that yesterday 100 times is really important. So Usain Bolt would have used his own techniques. And if you watch elite sports people, they all do something along these lines now. They're all starting to talk about deep breathing exercises. And we've known for a long time that, my mum told me when I was having a tantrum when I was 18 months old or 2 years old, take a deep breath.
Take a breath, yeah.
But they didn't know why. And as I said earlier, it was only till the early 90s when it was actually discovered how the heart interacted with the brain, that this was discovered. And now we can physiologically and show you with hardware and software on computers how that actually works. So yes, it's sports people are using these techniques, some better than others. Clearly, the English football team could probably teaching the penalty takers how to do it. But there's always going to be a period where you can evoke the positive emotion and breathe, and that's the key.
Fantastic. So just to sum up then, Andy, really what we're saying is we can use what happens to us physiologically and all of those hormones that it creates and all of the changes in our brain that it works. We can work out how to open up that hippocampus again, get to our intelligent brain and actually use this for good. We can use it positively. I suppose anybody very successful and very driven is thriving on that sort of stress and is able to manage it like a professional sports person.
Yeah, and top people in organisations, and it was funny. We rolled out a whole program of workshops, and one of my clients, I used to do stuff on their night shift, because for them to take their night shift off work to attend an hour-and-a-half workshop, they lost 3 days' work out of them. So we used to go in at night and do a workshop. And I did a workshop down in Kent to a group of about 100 guys, and then went back 6 months later and we did another workshop, and this chap came up to me and he said, I just wanted to thank you. And I went, what have I done? He said, well, I remember what you said about the breathing. I said, has it worked for you? He said, yeah. And I expected him to regale about a work story where it was like, really important. He said, I joined a band. And I went, okay, right. He said, yeah, and I was a singer in the band. He said, and it was they'd been together a while. It was my first gig. He said, and it wasn't like a big deal. It was only down the local village hall. He said, but it was still my first time on stage. He said, we stood there and we'd rehearsed and everything was good and I was ready to go. He said, and as we went to walk on stage, he said, not only could I not remember the words to the first song, I couldn't even remember what the first song was. And I said to the guys, we can't go out. He said, I don't know what the song is. And they said, it'll be fine. When you hear the music, you'll be fine. Just wait here and we'll go out and we'll start and then you can come on. And he said, at that moment in time, he said, I remember what you said. He said, and I pressed the pause button and I shut my eyes and I went to my happy place and I breathed in for 5 and out for 5 and in for 5 and out for 5. I then walked on stage and everything, clarity came back to me. And that was great for me because it's always nice when you do a workshop and someone comes back to you later and says it worked. I've got hundreds of thousands of testimonials, written and verbal, from people that say it's worked in various situations. We can't make any medical claims because we're not medical people, but people have said it's helped them with various, types of deals that I can't really go into. And then there's the obvious of people that are highly stressed. I had another young lady come up to me whose life was just a complete mess, and she was ordering, self-harm, and she had nothing to look forward to. And I sat down with her and I said, for 10, 15 minutes, I said, well, give me a happy place. I haven't got a happy place. It took me 10 minutes of talking to her to find out that her dream was to actually own a BMW and drive through the Lake District. So we managed to find her a happy place. Once she'd got that happy place in her head, she then managed to close her eyes, do the breathing, and invoke that. And again, I saw her about a year later, and her life was infinitely better than it had been previously. So again, very rewarding experience. But sometimes it takes us to a point where we need to change rather than arrive at a point where we want to change. You know, the classic of, I don't have time to go to the gym. Well, yeah, we all have time to go to the gym. If it's really that important, you know, we all have time to go to the pub or go to McDonald's or go to Costa Coffee or whatever it might, but we don't have time to go to the gym. So if you really want to do something, you can. You know, I had a chap said to me, well, it's all right for you. You talk about sleep and stuff, he says. It's all right for you, you don't work night shifts. And I went, no. I said, I don't. I said, who makes you do night shifts? And he went, what do you mean? I said, well, who's forcing you to do night shift? I said, surely it's a choice. It's your company, you've chosen to do nights. Well, yeah, it pays better. I said, okay, so you've chosen to do night shifts. If you don't want to do them, don't do them. Oh, then I won't be able to pay the mortgage. And I said, right, let's just stop and rewind. Because actually I've given you some techniques that are going to enable you to sleep better. You're telling me that they're not going to work, but you haven't tried them yet. You know, I said, I can prepare you to sleep. I can give you the tools to prepare to sleep, and I can explain to you about sleep and how all that works. But you're going to have to go away and do it, because I'm not going to come around your house tonight and read you a bedtime story. But you can metaphorically read yourself a bedtime story and do this if you want to. I never met him again, so I don't know whether he changed or not. But you need to want to change. And that's the first thing. All I can do is give you the information, you know, about the hippocampus and about adrenaline and cortisol and you know, the sleep chemical melatonin. And I can give you all that information, or you can go to Google and get most of this stuff, you know. But you're going to have to want to do it. You're the one that needs to go out and get some of this water stuff and drink it, you know, and make better food choices. You know, we can come on to talk about how we make decisions as a human being. You know, perhaps that's for another day. You know, and why we make certain decisions. Yeah, ultimately, you have to want to do it, and then you have to go and do it. No one's going to do it for you.
Fantastic, Andy. Thanks so much. I think I'm going to go off and find my happy place now and definitely get some water, because I've been feeling very guilty about my water intake today. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
So, Andy, tell us a little about what happens to our bodies when we get stressed.
Okay, so physiologically, the heart rules the head. So again, you know, we've all heard of that saying. But actually, it's true in physiological terms. So when we're stressed, we get a signal in our heart. It's like a spiky motion if you looked at it on a graph with peaks and troughs. And what happens is the heart sends a message to the brain via the amygdala, and it then calls for help. And we produce two chemicals, cortisol and adrenaline, that in essence allow us to run faster and hit harder. However, that's not the whole of the problem. The main problem is that there's a piece in the brain called the hippocampus, which is normally wound around the brain. But what happens at the same time as the production of the cortisol and adrenaline, the hippocampus flattens out and restricts access to the top of the head, which is where the thinking centers are. So in summary, we are hardwired and pre-programmed to make stupid decisions when we're stressed.
Andy, give me an example of how this could affect our lives in real terms.
Okay, well, let's go back to the driving side of it. Let's talk about something like road rage. It's quite weird because when we get in we walk down the street and someone bumps into us, or we're walking around Sainsbury's and someone pushes a trolley into us, we turn around and we apologise to them, even though it's like them that bumped us, because we haven't got this steel cage around us. And then we strap ourselves into a vehicle, and suddenly we become more aggressive because it's like my space and I've paid my road tax and this is my side of the road or my right of way or whatever it might be. And we become holier than thou about it, as if someone has like done us a real harm. You know, and I always think of my father, who in the 63 years that I knew him, never passed an opinion on anything or anyone. Even when I asked him when I was coming towards the end of my schooling about what I should do, he said, whatever you want to do. You know, he wouldn't ever give you a straight answer. But when he got behind the wheel of a car, he had an opinion about everything and everyone, and none of it was particularly complimentary.
Yeah.
Now, there's something called learned behaviour, People think that, kids pick up stuff and you always want their first word to be mummy or daddy, but normally it's an F word or some other thing that they've picked up inadvertently that you haven't taught them, but they've learnt. And of course, I was in this environment in a car with my mother and my father, with my dad becoming, irate with other drivers for whatever reason, even though in every other form of life, he was completely the antithesis of that. And I was learning that behaviour. So guess how I behaved when I first got my driving licence when I was 16 or 17? I behaved like my dad did, and like other people did. So learned behaviour is sort of really key to that. So that's sort of like the start of road rage, if you like. And as I say, we have this holier than thou view of like where we belong and what we should do. And when someone does cause us offence for whatever reason, we quite invariably sound the horn and give them a hand signal that you might not see in the highway code, normally involves one finger or two fingers, or a wave of the hand. And we wouldn't do that in any other world, or most of us wouldn't anyway. So what causes that? And it's that stress, it's that spike moment, it's that heart, message up to the brain that then clouds our judgment because the hippocampus has flattened out and we can't access the thinking center. So we make a stupid decision, and the instant reaction is sounding the horn in an aggressive manner. We advocate sounding the horn a lot when we're teaching people how to drive in a defensive or advanced manner. And I'd just like to point out that the horn is an inanimate object that makes a noise. The aggression is in the way that you sound it or the way that you hear it. But a short, sharp beep to attract someone's attention, followed by a wave when they look at you to acknowledge the fact, diffuses the situation. But most people these days sound the horn about 2 or 3 seconds after it would have been useful. So it's as a reaction.
Yeah.
And then that invokes a reaction in the other person. And their hippocampus has now flattened out and restrict access to their thinking center. And you get involved in this situation.
Yeah.
I've spent a little bit of time driving in America. And my wife, bless her, always says to me, don't be aggressive when you're driving because the person in the other car may well pull a gun out of their, glove compartment.
Yeah.
In this country, that's probably not going to happen. But certainly in other parts of the world, one could get in a huge amount of trouble. But even so, we've all been in a situation where we probably picked a fight with someone on the road that we then wished we hadn't.
Yeah.
So to wind back from it again, with the breathing exercises, just relax, calm down, and think how you would react if that was in the street or in the pub. Someone bumped into your elbow in the pub or whatever. Just think about how you would react and deal with it in the same calm manner.
Andy, tell us why we should be teaching stress management in schools.
Oh, there's a question. Well, I can tell you an example of a school we did some work with several years ago now in Northern Ireland, and we went out there. We got called in to do some work with the kids, and it was from a school from the wrong side of the tracks, if you like, from the poorer end of town, and they'd never had anyone sort of qualified to go to the grammar school locally. And we did some work with the kids. We taught them the heart math techniques, the breathing exercises, the happy place. And the following year, they had 5 students qualified to go to the local grammar school. Now, I'm not saying that's just down to what we did, but it certainly helped. And I think, children are so susceptible to like new ideas, and if we plug them into the program on the computer with the earpiece, they can see their heart rate and they love all that sort of stuff. I mean, it works great with adults too, to be fair, but with the kids, they love it. And then when you teach them the breathing exercises, there's actually some games we can play. So rather than looking at the graph, they're looking at a balloon flying around the world. And when they get the breathing exercises right, the balloon goes higher and faster around the world. Or there's a garden game where the garden colours in and then a unicorn appears, the better they get at it. So you just get them to play the game, and they're just controlling the game with their breath. And once they start to see how they can control that sort of thing, it's then a very short, stretch for them to get them to do that in other environments, whether it's sport environment or when they're struggling in a class with a particular subject. And if, I often, when I had my own business, I sort of like wanted to start every meeting with everyone sitting there for a minute doing the breathing exercises. But I was a bit afraid to do so because everyone would have thought it's a bit west coast of America, which is where this comes from, incidentally, but it's a bit west coast of America, up in the mountains, smoking some substances, So it was like almost frowned upon in the business environment. But for the kids to just ingrain that in their life at an early stage is so important for them to have some techniques to be able to deal with stuff further down the line that might help them in a more dangerous environment, because as we know, particularly in the cities these days, kids growing up, there's some situations where self-control and being able to back away and think twice would be certainly a very important skill to have.